My cousin threw a glass of wine in my face because I told the family I was pregnant. 2 weeks later, she tried to poison my baby. The really messed up part? My aunt still thinks I'm the villain in this story. Let me back up. When I was 6, my parents died in a car accident. My Aunt Sarah took me in. She told me I was family. She told me she'd love me like her own. What she didn't tell me was that I'd spend the next 20 years watching her give everything to my cousin Melissa while I got leftovers and lectures about being grateful. At Melissa's high school graduation, Aunt Sarah threw a party at a country club, catered dinner, live band, 200 guests. I graduated the same year from the same school, same GPA. My celebration was pizza in the living room with 3 of Aunt Sarah's friends. When I asked why mine was different, she said Melissa had worked harder. When Melissa turned 18, Aunt Sarah sent her to Paris. Study abroad, apartment, monthly stipend, $60,000 total. I was 20 and working 2 jobs to pay for community college. For my 21st birthday, they gave me a Target gift card, $50. I used it to buy groceries. When Melissa got married, Uncle Tom opened a trust fund for her, $200,000. She got the interest monthly, about $600 for doing nothing. For my wedding 3 years later, Aunt Sarah gave me $500 cash. David and I got married at City Hall. Melissa's wedding had 4 bridesmaids and a reception at the same country club. I tried not to keep score, told myself it didn't matter. But every Christmas, when Melissa opened designer handbags and jewelry, I'd sit there with my new dish towels and wonder what was wrong with me, why I wasn't good enough, why I still wanted my aunt to love me after everything. Part of me knew the answer. I just didn't want to believe it. The breaking point came at my great-uncle's lake house. James was my grandfather's brother, built a construction company from nothing, worth $8 million at 83, and still going to the office 3 days a week. We had family gatherings twice a year, Memorial Day and Labor Day. Everyone came. It was the only time I felt like part of something. That Labor Day, I was 12 weeks pregnant. David and I had been trying for 2 years, 3 miscarriages. I hadn't told anyone because I was terrified of losing this one too. But Great-Uncle James pulled me aside during the barbecue and asked straight out if I was expecting, said I had that glow. I started crying. He hugged me for a long time and said he was proud of me. First time in years someone in my family had said that. We were sitting at the picnic tables when I finally told everyone. David squeezed my hand. I kept it simple. We were having a baby, due in March. Aunt Sarah's face went blank. Uncle Tom nodded, but his voice was flat. Melissa stood up so fast, her chair fell backward. She grabbed her wine glass and threw it in my face. Cold liquid ran down my neck. The glass bounced off my shoulder and shattered on the concrete. Melissa started screaming, said I was stealing her moment, that I knew she and Marcus had been trying for years, that I'd done this on purpose. Everyone froze. Marcus tried to grab her arm. She shoved him away, kept screaming, calling me selfish, saying I'd probably gotten pregnant just to hurt her. Great-Uncle James stood up from the head of the table, looked at Melissa, then at Aunt Sarah, then at me with wine dripping off my chin. He told Melissa to leave. When she didn't move, he said it again, "Leave now." Said if she didn't go in 60 seconds, he'd call the police for assault. Marcus dragged her to the car. She was still yelling as they drove away. The next morning, Great-Uncle James called me, said he'd been thinking about the company, about Aunt Sarah's job there, about the house they'd been renting from him cheap for 15 years. He'd changed his mind about all of it. He was making me CEO immediately and giving Aunt Sarah 60 days to move out or pay market rate. I told him that seemed extreme. He said extreme was throwing wine in a pregnant woman's face. Said it was time they learned what consequences felt like. 3 days later, Aunt Sarah showed up at my apartment, 7 in the morning, crying. She said Melissa was devastated, that fertility struggles had triggered her, that Melissa wanted to apologize. Then she asked me to talk to Great-Uncle James. Convince him to reconsider. Let the family business stay in the family, meaning her side, meaning not me. I said no. The tears stopped. She told me I was making a mistake. That family sticks together. I closed the door while she was still talking. That afternoon, Great Uncle James called again. Said Aunt Sarah had come to his office trying to negotiate. He'd refused. But she'd asked if he was planning to fire her too. The question bothered him, made him realize she was already thinking about how to play victim. He let her go. 2-week severance. Her choice to train her replacement or leave immediately. I thought that was the end of it. The next week, I went back to work, paralegal at a small law firm downtown. Got to the office at 8:30. Made myself coffee in the break room. It tasted wrong, bitter, chemical. Poured it out and made a new pot. That one tasted fine. Didn't think much about it. Until that night when the cramping started. David drove me to the emergency room. The cramping got worse in the car. By the time we got there, I was doubled over. The ER doctor did an ultrasound. Baby was fine, strong heartbeat, but my uterus was contracting. She asked if I'd taken anything, any medications. I said no. She ordered blood work. 2 hours later, she came back. There was misoprostol in my system. She explained it was a drug used to induce labor or cause abortion, a high dose. Enough to terminate a pregnancy. If I hadn't thrown it up, if I'd absorbed the full amount, I would have miscarried. The only thing I'd had all day was coffee at work. David called the office, told them to preserve the coffee pot. Then he called the police. The next morning, 2 detectives came to our apartment. They pulled security footage from the building. The footage showed Melissa entering through the side entrance at 7:45, walked straight to the break room, stayed 3 minutes, left the same way, 15 minutes before I arrived. The coffee tested positive for misoprostol, high concentration. The detectives went to question Melissa. She claimed she'd stopped by to apologize, changed her mind, and left. When they asked why she used the side entrance, she said she didn't want to make a scene. They didn't arrest her, said the evidence was circumstantial, couldn't prove she put anything in the coffee. The defense would argue someone else did it, or that I'd done it myself for attention. They needed more. Part of me wondered if I was being paranoid. Maybe Melissa really was just struggling with fertility. Maybe I'd made everything worse by announcing my pregnancy at the barbecue. Maybe I was the problem. Then I remembered the look on her face when that wine glass left her hand. That wasn't grief. That was hate. I set up the baby monitor we'd bought for the nursery in the bathroom instead. Testing it out, I told David. He thought I was paranoid. I told him I didn't care. 2 weeks later, I was right. 2 in the morning, motion alert on my phone. Someone in my bathroom. I zoomed in. Melissa, wearing all black, latex gloves. She went straight to the medicine cabinet, took out my prenatal vitamins, emptied half the capsules, put the bottle in her pocket, took out a different bottle, poured those capsules into my vitamin bottle, shook it, put it back. The baby monitor caught everything. Clear image, timestamp, her face visible when she turned toward the mirror. 4 minutes, in and out. I waited until she left, took the vitamin bottle to the kitchen, hid it in the freezer, called the detectives the next morning, sent them the footage. Lab results came back 3 days later. The vitamins had been replaced with capsules containing lead acetate, not enough to kill me outright, but enough to cause severe developmental problems in the baby, brain damage, organ failure. If I'd taken them for another month, the baby wouldn't have survived. This time, the detectives got a warrant from Melissa's house, found my prenatal vitamins in her bathroom drawer, my name still on the prescription label. They arrested her at work. Uncle Tom bailed her out the same day, $40,000. Aunt Sarah called me that night, screaming, said I'd set Melissa up, planted the cameras, faked the footage, said I was trying to destroy Melissa because I was jealous, said my parents would be ashamed of me. I hung up. David held me while I cried. Melissa's lawyer claimed I'd faked everything, edited the footage, planted the vitamins during a visit. The prosecutor said they had a case, but it wasn't airtight. They needed something more, a confession, a witness, something that proved intent. 3 weeks later, Marcus called, Melissa's husband, soon-to-be ex. He said he'd found something, couldn't keep it to himself. We met at a diner outside town. He looked terrible, hadn't slept in weeks. He slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were printouts, screenshots from Melissa's laptop, browser history she thought she'd deleted, search queries going back months. How to cause miscarriage without detection, symptoms of lead poisoning in pregnancy, drugs that cause spontaneous abortion. How long does misoprostol stay in system? There were purchase records, a P.O. box she'd rented under a fake name, receipts for lead acetate from a chemical supply company, charges to prepaid cards bought with cash. And there were text messages, hundreds of them, to a number Marcus didn't recognize. Someone she called K, planning everything, timing, dosages, how to avoid getting caught. One message from 3 days before the coffee incident. Tomorrow morning, side entrance. 7:45. She always gets there at 8:30. Kay's response: don't leave fingerprints. Wipe everything down. Marcus had already given copies to the police, but he wanted me to see it first, to know what she really was. The police traced the number, a woman named Karen. They'd met on some online forum for people with difficult family situations. Karen had a record: fraud, identity theft. She'd been coaching Melissa for months, teaching her how to cover her tracks. Karen rolled on Melissa the second they brought her in, gave them everything: planning, purchases, the conversations. All of it recorded because Karen had been working with police on an unrelated case, and they'd flagged the messages about causing a miscarriage. Now they had intent, premeditation, conspiracy. But Melissa wasn't done. 2 weeks before trial, a package arrived at the police station, anonymous. Inside was a USB drive with security footage, supposedly showing me entering my own office at 7:45 that morning. Not Melissa, me. The timestamp altered, the footage spliced from different days. There was a typed letter, a concerned citizen who'd witnessed me buying misoprostol online, screenshots of a fake account using my email address. The police brought me in for questioning, 3 hours. They'd received tips that I'd been struggling with pregnancy depression, that I'd told friends I wasn't sure I wanted the baby, that I'd researched abortion pills. All lies. All fabricated. David called Great Uncle James. James called his lawyers. They brought in a digital forensics expert. Took 4 days to prove the footage was manipulated. The metadata didn't match. The shadows were wrong. The tips all came from burner phones purchased near Melissa's house. 4 days where some family members believed I'd poisoned myself for attention. 4 days where my aunt posted on Facebook that I was framing her daughter. The prosecutor added evidence tampering and obstruction to Melissa's charges. Then, Melissa attacked Great Uncle James. She'd been volunteering at the senior center where he had lunch 3 times a week, signed in as a helper, served food. Someone put arsenic in his meal, not enough to kill him, enough to make him violently ill. His kidneys never fully recovered. The police couldn't prove she did it specifically. Dozens of volunteers near his table. Her lawyer argued she was volunteering to show the court she was reforming, but Great Uncle James didn't believe in coincidences. He called his lawyer, transferred everything to my name that week: the company, the trust funds, the property, all of it. Legal and binding. Said if something happened to him before the trial, he wanted to make sure Melissa and Aunt Sarah couldn't contest it. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Melissa's lawyer tried everything: mental illness, coercion by Karen, pregnancy-related trauma even though she was never pregnant. But the text messages destroyed every defense. Her own words, planning murder like a grocery list. The prosecutor saved the conversation with Karen for last. Read them out loud for the whole courtroom. Every message, every detail, every calculation about dosages and timing, and how to avoid detection. I watched Melissa's face as her own words filled the room. For 3 weeks, she'd been composed, tearful when necessary, confused when useful. But when the prosecutor read the message where she'd written, "She'll probably blame it on pregnancy complications," something cracked. She stood up. Her lawyer tried to pull her down. She shoved him away, started screaming that I'd faked the messages, that I'd paid Karen to lie, that this was all a conspiracy. The judge ordered her to sit. She didn't. She pointed at me and screamed that I'd stolen everything: her mother, her inheritance, her life, that I should have died with my parents, that she'd finish what she started if she ever got the chance. 2 bailiffs grabbed her. She fought them, knocked one down, tried to climb over the barrier toward me. David pulled me behind him. Great Uncle James stood up despite his cane. It took 4 people to drag her out. She was still screaming. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing was 2 weeks later. Her lawyer asked for psychiatric evaluation. The evaluation found her competent, not psychotic, not delusional, just entitled, incapable of empathy, but fully aware of right and wrong. 32 years. No parole for 25. Marcus filed for divorce the next day. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Tom watched their daughter get taken away in handcuffs. Melissa didn't look at them, didn't look at anyone. After sentencing, Aunt Sarah approached me in the hallway. Looked like she'd aged 20 years. Tried to say something. Nothing came out. Uncle Tom stood behind her with his hands in his pockets. Finally, she said she was sorry. Not for what Melissa did. She still seemed to think that was my fault somehow. But sorry that things turned out this way. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. They moved to Florida 2 months later. Cut off contact with everyone. I thought that was the end. Great Uncle James passed away when my daughter Jamie was 2. Peaceful, in his sleep. Left everything exactly as he'd promised. The company was already mine. The lake house, the investments, all of it. His funeral was packed. Employees, partners, friends, people whose lives he'd changed. Aunt Sarah didn't come. I didn't expect her to. Then, on Jamie's 3rd birthday, a letter arrived. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting. Aunt Sarah's careful cursive, 11 pages. She wrote about the day my parents died, how she'd promised my mother she'd take care of me, how she'd meant it at the time. She wrote about Melissa, how she'd been difficult from birth, never satisfied, how giving Melissa everything had been easier than fighting, how giving me less became habit, then policy, then belief. She wrote about when Melissa was 9. The neighbor's cat went missing. They found it in the creek behind their house. Drowned. Melissa said it was an accident, that she'd been trying to give it a bath. Aunt Sarah believed her, paid the neighbor for a new pet, never spoke of it again. She wrote about all the signs she'd ignored, teachers who called, friends who stopped coming over, the way Melissa talked about other people like they weren't real. She said she knew. Some part of her always knew, but admitting it meant admitting she'd failed. That her daughter was broken, that maybe she'd broken her by never saying no. The last 2 pages were different. She wrote, I told myself I was protecting Melissa by giving her everything, that if I loved her enough, she'd be okay. I called it motherhood. It was enabling. I created her, and you paid the price for it. Your whole life, you paid for my mistakes. She didn't ask for forgiveness. Said she knew she didn't deserve it, just wanted me to know she finally understood. I read the letter 3 times, put it in a drawer, haven't looked at it since. Jamie is 5 now, healthy, happy. She doesn't know anything about Melissa, or the trial, or how her mom almost lost her before she was born. She just knows she's loved. That's enough for now. David and I talk about having another baby sometimes. The company is doing well. We hired a CEO to run day-to-day while I focus on strategy. Turns out, I was good at it. The business grew 40% in 3 years. Some days, I still check the locks twice, still look over my shoulder in parking lots. The fear doesn't fully go away. You just learn to live around it. Great Uncle James left me a letter to be opened on Jamie's 5th birthday. His lawyer gave it to me last week. It said he always knew I'd be okay. That I'd survived 20 years of being second and still turned out kind. He said that was enough for him. Melissa writes me from prison sometimes. The letters go straight to the trash. I don't need her apologies. Don't want her explanations. I used to think I wanted Aunt Sarah to love me, to see me the way she saw Melissa, to choose me just once. Now I know it wouldn't have fixed anything. The problem was never me. Never about whether I was good enough. The problem was that Aunt Sarah taught Melissa the world owed her everything. And when the world said no, Melissa tried to burn it down. I'm teaching Jamie something different, that life isn't fair, that wanting something doesn't mean you deserve it, that family is about how you treat people, not just blood. She won't grow up watching someone else get everything while she gets nothing. She'll grow up knowing she's enough, exactly as she is. And that's the only revenge that matters.